But 6 months later, I could have recited her shell companies, the cadence of her kickbacks, the dates her deposits hit, because she made one fatal mistake. She picked a fight with me, Daniel Rivers, a retired construction lawyer who had spent 2 decades following rotten money through cleaner ledgers than hers, and who, after losing my wife Clara, had nothing left to lose except my patience for bullies pretending to be rules. That Tuesday at 6 in the morning, when the sun was still shrugging into the sky and the coffee steam was climbing my face like quiet hope, 2 officers stood on my porch looking like they wished they were anywhere else. And there she was between them, tennis visor low, clipboard high, vanilla perfume turning the air into syrup, telling them with that practiced gentility that our community had concerns. And I remember thinking that it takes a special kind of smallness to wake a man with sirens over a swimming pool. 8 months earlier I'd bought that still smelled of drywall dust, walking paths, crepe myrtles lined up like soldiers. I paid a premium for the view, the corner angles, the promise of quiet, because grief had hollowed out the rooms of my old life, and I needed a place where mornings could land without breaking. After Clara died, I retired for good, boxed up 20 years of deposition binders and courthouse parking passes. Told myself I'd take my coffee without arguments and my afternoons without adversaries, and for a while I managed it. Dawn light skimming the pool, the whisper of early swimmers, the shiver of water. Cashier and means it, the son my brother raised while I grew a career and watched calendars eat themselves. He picked up hours at the hardware store, came home smelling like cedar and machine oil, called me sir and splashed like they still trusted the world, and 90 minutes later the echo of their laughter was interrupted by the bark of a voice that thought it was a gavel. I need guest passes for these boys, Melissa said, the clipboard an extension of her wrist, her sunglasses reflecting 3 startled teenagers and 1 man trying to remember if joy required paperwork. Their family, I told her, calm as the water. Rules are rules, she replied, smile blade sharp. Pool access for Lot 19 is suspended pending compliance review. Alleged violations listed like accusations scrawled on a bathroom stall, grass height, trash cans, and my personal favorite, failure to maintain community harmony, which is what tyrants call it when you don't bow fast enough. The hearing day was Clara's birthday. I had planned sunflowers and a quiet hour at her grave, but instead I poured a small whiskey and read the HOA's founding documents the way a good lawyer reads scripture, not for comfort, but for the footnotes. On page 48, in black ink that felt warmer than it should, I found the clause that mattered: reasonable. Accommodation shall be provided for family gatherings and multi-generational activities. In other words, the rule she threw at me had no legs. In other words, she'd built her parade on a paper bridge. That evening, I walked into a room that should never have hosted official business. Melissa's dining room, lavender air freshener muscling the oxygen, Alan Bishop, the HOA president, clearing his throat like a metronome, Sophie Grant, the treasurer, writing with the precision of someone who has seen numbers lie and refuses to let them. Melissa clicked through a PowerPoint about community values that showed more stock photos than statutes, and when she finished, I stood with my folder of tabs and calm, and I laid out, like a contractor unrolling plans, the procedural memory, state business filings, county deed records, municipal contracts, the boring seams where money leaks through the fabric and leaves a darker line. By 2 in the morning, I found the first stitch. Melissa Carter Realty had served as the exclusive sales agent for Cedar Ridge during development by Blue Rock Construction. I've never met a developer who gives exclusivity without expecting something in return, and I've never met a fixer who doesn't make herself look like a volunteer while she takes her percentage. The retaliation escalated in predictable beats. A neighborhood watch. A flag that was 2 inches larger than the flag next door. Cars rolled slow past my house. Phones appeared behind tinted glass, and the warnings under my guests' wipers felt less like rule enforcement and more like stage directions. Evan joked that we had our own paparazzi, but at 16 a joke is what you call the fear you don't want your uncle to see. Then Sophie approached me. Statements, contracts, and approvals that had passed the board looking legitimate and landed on our budget looking hungry. Landscaping at 40% above market. Pool maintenance at rates that would have made a private resort blush, a snow removal retainer, in a county that sees snow once a decade and brags the whole time. I traced the lines, totaled the differences, and felt that familiar mixture of dread and clarity when the math announces a crime. Roughly $700,000 budgeted for amenities that cost much less to build, and the extra vanishing with the commercial activity at my address, and scheduled the inspection for Friday, the day of Evan's graduation party. 20 family members, a rented grill, a chocolate cake big enough to shame bad behavior. The inspector arrived at 2 sharp, looked like a man who had been to this rodeo too often, and behind him rolled Melissa's SUV, as if humiliation required spectators. I set the bankers. Box on the porch, stamped plans, approved permits, final occupancy letters, every signature lined up like soldiers on parade. Evan, God bless kids and their instincts for daylight, started live streaming. For 2 hours the inspector measured, probed, checked, climbed, frowning in the way professionals frown when they find nothing but competence. When he finished, he turned to Melissa. B violations. Insisted the world owed her a crime to match the energy she had spent accusing one into being, and the comments on Evan's feed turned into a parade of other people's HOA nightmares. The collective internet shaking its head at yet another small queen guarding a shallow moat. The real break came after sunset, when Sophie arrived carrying an envelope she'd kept like a live wire. For almost 3 years, emails between Melissa and Blue Rock CEO, subject line, revised amenity pricing, confidential, the kind of correspondence you only write if you believe no one will ever read. In the emails as adjustments and profit margin alignment, and the timing of HOA payments matched unusual deposits into accounts tied to Melissa's side businesses. It was the kind of documentary chain that prosecutors dream about and defense attorneys drink about. We needed a plan. Evidence alone is a map, not a journey. I called Alan Bishop, who, despite presiding over that ridiculous marketing incentives, we divided the work. Sophie would systematize the records, Alan would shepherd procedural moves without tipping our hand, and I would prepare filings, public records requests. Melissa panicked in the way small tyrants do, by trying to legislate silence. She called an emergency meeting to propose disruptive resident fines, up to $1,000 for anyone who undermined. Suggested that my retirement had left me with too much time to stir conflict, and peppered the speech with dog whistles about residents who don't understand our way of life, which is what some people say when they want to talk about race without moving their lips. I stood, opened my manila folder, and let process do what it has always done for me. Calm the blood, sharpen the edges. I laid out the statutory notice requirements she'd ignored, the vagueness doctrine that would murder her fines in court, the Texas Property Code sections that protect residents seeking financial transparency, and then, when the room had shifted forward in their chairs, I projected the emails. Silence is loud when numbers are doing the speaking. This is about keeping people like him from ruining what we built. Melissa snapped, pointing at me as if I were a problem set, and the phones rose like a flock of small birds, capturing a sentence that told on itself. After the meeting, in the parking lot under the sodium light simmer of a humid evening, she approached me with the smile people use when they practice kindness in a mirror. We could work something out, she said. The HOA budget has flexibility, pool maintenance waived, maybe help with your landscaping, if you just let the board handle the noise quietly. The recorder app on my phone has a simple interface. Law enforcement like being turned into a prop by a liar. They left with apologies and a thinly veiled promise to Melissa that future false reports would be treated like the crimes they are. A city councilman who had been conspicuously absent every time she swung a clipboard resigned to focus on family, and the local news discovered Evan's livestream, which became the on-ramp for a broader story about HOA abuse that made neighbors all over the county look at their budgets like suspicious receipts. Melissa lashed out before the walls finished closing. My pool equipment suffered mysterious failures. A camera caught late-night shadows near my side yard. A baseball took a perfectly improbable path to my home office window. Her supporters, suddenly shy, stopped liking her posts but kept peeking out between curtains. The sabotage only tightened our case. Motive, means, pattern, retaliation, the steady drum of arrogance that makes juries nod along with prosecutors. Fluorescent honesty. Alan sat at one table, shoulders squared. Sophie beside him, eyes bright with the particular calm of someone who knows her ledgers have teeth. Melissa arrived with a lawyer and the phones turned it into a record. Melissa opened with a practiced tremble, a speech about volunteerism and harassment, about a widower weaponizing legal tricks, about community harmony being shredded by one man's obsession. When she finished, the room held her words for a second and then let them go like balloons. I connected my laptop to the projector, and the slides did what slides. Thread where someone typed the sentence you never want read aloud. We can absorb overage through dues over time. A sound like a room remembering its own dignity washed through the chairs. Embezzlement and obstruction. Melissa's attorney tugged her sleeve, but she couldn't help it. She rose and tried to explain that everything was out of context, that if I hadn't made such a fuss, something fragile and important, and I understood that whatever happened next, the community had already decided who we were going to be. The arrest came quietly, warrants served like folded notes. Melissa booked without spectacle, Blue Rock executives receiving letters with the kind of formality that chokes. Over the next months, the case moved like a machine that had been built for this exact kind of theft. Bank holds, forensic audits, depositions where people discovered they were worse liars under oath than at cocktail parties. Brian Carter negotiated his silence into absence. Blue Rock lost municipal contracts faster than they could draft statements about committed partnerships. Melissa pled before trial, because the line between confidence and delusion tends to bend everywhere. But the end of a case is only a beginning if you let it be, and we did. Cedar Ridge voted for real oversight. Quarterly financials posted in plain English, competitive bidding with blind Ladder's acoustics better. We used part of the recovered funds to erase HOA dues for 3 years, another part to finish the amenities we were originally promised, shaded seating, a walking loop that actually reached the Oaks, a playground that didn't wobble when a child laughed, and we set aside the remainder for the Clara Rivers Memorial Scholarship, which sent its first student, a shy genius with oil-stained fingers, to an engineering program that would fit him the way a good glove holds a strong hand. At the first summer pool party after all of it, the water looked the way water looks when it belongs to the people it was meant to serve. Lived in, loud, silvered by sun. I stood under an umbrella with a paper plate and a burger I didn't need, and Evan, taller now. Music I wanted in my last act. The rest of it is ripples and echoes. Other neighborhoods called, and I shared templates and checklists, not sermons. Legislators reached out, and I told them that transparency isn't a headline. It's a habit you write into the bylaws so no personality can undo it. Real estate agents started giving buyers a pamphlet about financial oversight along with the welcome basket, which is one of those small, sensible revolutions you don't notice until it has already changed the air. And in our community meetings, the comments shifted from complaint to collaboration, because when people see their money as a story they are writing together, they become the kind of authors who fight for a satisfying ending. Now and then, on quiet mornings, I still wake at 6, open the door to the same porch and the same light, hear the same birds tuning themselves like an orchestra looking for the first downbeat. If I close my eyes, I can smell that old vanilla perfume, hear the crisp flip of a clipboard page, feel again the thud of a certified letter in a metal box. I can replay a graduation cake interrupted by an inspector and saved by documentation. I can watch a projector screen glow with numbers that stood naked and obvious in a crowded gym. But mostly I feel something else, not vindication, not even relief, just a steady, usable calm, like a carpenter's bench worn smooth by righteous work. We didn't win because we were louder. We won because we were patient and exact and stubborn about the difference between a rule and a weapon. Melissa learned what happens when you mistake power for impunity. The rest of us learned that community is not the absence of conflict, but the presence of accountability. Or do you gather your receipts, turn on the camera, read the charter, and make the numbers speak? Tell me what justice looks like where you live, who was right, who was wrong, what the line should be between order and overreach. And if you've got your own story about a petty crown and a public pool, put it below, because somewhere a neighbor is reading and deciding whether to be brave.